Before I begin, can I remind members to turn off their mobile phones completely as they interfere with the recording equipment. We deal first with correspondence, which turn to some housekeeping matters. The minutes of meeting 15th May have been circulated. Are there any matters arising? No matters arising, they're agreed. Correspondence 2019-465 from Deputy Imelda Munster to raise the issue. Yep.
Yeah, just in relation to the Irish athletes, and just looking for the committee to confirm or to reaffirm the fact that we had initially agreed that they would be included in the work programme, and an invitation had been sent out, and there seems to have been some confusion since, but I'm just asking that the committee reaffirm to include, to have them in before the committee, and to agree a date also.
Would you propose that?
I would propose that, yes.
That's agreed unanimously. Yep, agreed. Sorry, the Vice Chair. Correspondence 2019-466A and B. A. Email from Jennifer Cullen, Minister's Office, Department of Transport, attaching briefing document in relation to state funding to the FAI, and B. Briefing document on state funding to the FAI. Anybody wishes to raise that matter or discuss it further? It's proposed to note that correspondence. That agreed? Agreed. Correspondence 2019-467, emailed from Chris Smith, Minister's Office, declining the invitation to appear before the committee on 29th May to report on accessibility of public transport for people with disabilities, but indicating that Minister Ross would not be available to update the committee until the end of June at the earliest convenience. Deputy Troy.
Chairman, I'm concerned in relation to the Minister's correspondence. A lot of good work was done by this committee in compiling a report in relation to what needs to be done in making sure our public transport system is more accessible to people with disabilities and mobility issues. And there was a clear commitment given by Minister Ross when he came to the launch of that report, that in order to make sure that the recommendations were implemented in an efficient and timely manner, that we would set in stone dates for when he would appear before the committee and answer questions in relation to the implementation of the recommendations. He agreed to that, and now the only reason he's not accepting the invitation to be here today is because there's no progress and he has nothing to update us on, and he's seeking an additional month in order to come back in and buy himself additional time. If we're serious about the report that we launched, and full credit to all the committee members who took full part in it, and also to all the stakeholders who took time out, and the advocates of people with disabilities who came before the committee and participated in this process. I think it's very, very wrong of the Minister not to have accepted the invitation today, and I think we should write back to him and outline certainly my concern to his non-appearance here today.
Okay, Deputy Munster.
I'd like to agree with what Deputy Troy has said to him. I think we should write to the Minister, because it was made very clear after all of the work that had gone in, and after all the outreaching and the liaison with all the various groups. It was a very detailed report, and the Minister did give a commitment when we pressed the importance of continuous follow-up to examine what progress is made. And I think it sends out the wrong signal, if you like, when the Minister doesn't prioritise giving this committee a progress update on accessibility in our public transport system for persons with disabilities. It's the wrong signal, and I think the committee need to make that clear to him and to ask him, where possible, because he did give the commitment, to rearrange his diary and give this matter priority.
Okay, now I've just been informed by the clerk that the Bush Telegraph must be working, because he's just emailed to say the Minister that he's available to attend here on the 25th of June. Sorry, 26th, sorry.
26th.
So I just got that now, so.
Okay.
Okay, so we've dealt with that issue then. Okay, so correspondence item 2019-468 A, B and C. A. Email from Colin McGinty, Sports Ireland, dated 29th of April, attaching 2 additional information documents requested by our committee. B. FAI Governance Review Group approved terms of reference. C. Additional information as requested by the committee. This was circulated to members for the meeting of the 15th of May and it's been recirculated as some people may not have received it. So that's agreed? Correspondence item 2019-469, email from Josie Brady, Clerk to the Joint Committee on Agriculture, forward an email from Shane Carr in relation to procurement of Coast Guard services. Proposed to note that correspondence agreed. Agreed. Yeah. Correspondence 2019-470, email from Shanador Pádraig Ó Céidigh, dated 16th May, suggesting a joint committee invite both the FAI and Sports Ireland on separate dates to attend the joint committee before the summer recess. Now, Senator Céidigh has left just there right now, and just on that, I said that I was in contact with Sports Ireland just before the meeting, and I asked them for an update on their forensic audit proposals. So it has been circulated. We just got it today, so every member would have it. I appreciate people may not have read it properly in terms of time to read it properly, because it's 3 or 4 pages there. So will the committee, I know in the absence of Senator Céidigh, what will we do? What proposals do we have?
Well, we had said
concerns
in that, and that we would maybe try and prioritise and fix a date agree a date for Sports Ireland to come before the committee and the FAI.
Yeah, and to update us as soon as possible. We agree that. And there's also, I understand, the Minister is holding a conference this Friday in the Mansion House in relation to this issue. Now, I don't know, we don't seem to have received any invitation to go at all. We did you? Okay.
Directly as members, I think.
Yeah. You did?
I did.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well that's good. Okay then, so if members wish to attend, they should. Okay. That didn't come through the committee. Oh, it didn't come through the committee, yeah. That's fair enough. Correspondence 2019-471, email from Shane Conneely, Chambers Ireland, attaching Chambers of Ireland Local Government Manifesto and the Chambers Ireland Local Government Manifesto B. Proposed to note that correspondence. That agreed? Agreed. Now we go on to our public session, our engagement with the All Ireland Cruise Ship Action Group. Can I remind members again, the witnesses and those in public gallery, please turn off their phones. I've already done that. We're joined by Mr. Lachlan O'Connor, Managing Director of Carls Ireland, Mr. Richard Guiney, Chief Executive of Dublin Town, Ms. Niamh McCarthy, Managing Director of Excursions Ireland, Mr. Brian Rankin, Head of Public Affairs, Retail Excellence Ireland. You're all very welcome. Before we commence, in accordance with procedures, I just have to read this. By virtue of Section 17(2)(1) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or it identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against either a person outside the Houses or an official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I now invite Mr. Lachlan O'Connor, Managing Director with Carl's Gift Ireland, to make his opening statement.
I'd like to begin by sincerely thanking the committee for inviting the All-Ireland Cruise Action Group here today to discuss a very serious concern we have about Dublin Port's severe restrictions on cruise ships entering Dublin Port from 2021. The All-Ireland Cruise Ship Action Group was formed by a group of businesses in Dublin, Cork and Waterford who will be severely impacted by the Dublin Ports company's decision to severely reduce the numbers of cruise ships entering Dublin Port from 2021. Our members include Ireland's leading iconic retailers, tourist attractions, transport operators, hotels, restaurants and other businesses impacted by Dublin Port's decision. A number of trade associations, including Dublin Town, Retail Excellence Ireland, the Restaurants Association of Ireland, are also members of the All-Ireland Cruise Action Group. My name is Lorcan O'Connor. I'm Managing Director of Carroll's. I'm joined here today by other members of the group. Richard Guiney, Chief Executive of Dublin Town, representing 2,500 businesses in Dublin City Centre. Niamh McCarthy, Managing Director of Excursions Ireland, who are on the front line of the cruise industry in Dublin Port, and Brian Rankin from Retail Excellence Ireland. I want to begin by providing a broad background to the issue, and I will then pass over to my colleagues who will go into more depth about the Dublin Port's decision, which will impact on business and tourism not just in Dublin City, but also in Belfast, Cove and Waterford, and in the wider tourism industry in Ireland. For the past 15 years, the Dublin Port Company, along with many stakeholders, state bodies, trade associations and the wider tourism sector, have been actively promoting Dublin as an international cruise destination. Thanks to this hard work and the dedication of many people over the last 15 years, the promotion of Dublin and Ireland as a cruise destination has been an outstanding success. Countless individuals have devoted themselves to the cause and the hope of building the cruise industry in Ireland, and the Dublin Port Company have been central to this. In 2019, 175 ships will pass through Dublin Port, bringing us almost 500,000 tourists into Dublin City and generating over 50 million for the local economy. Next year, there will be even more cruise ships visiting Dublin with more cruise passengers. However, in 2021, the hard work and stunning growth of the past 15 years will be wiped out by the actions of the Dublin Port Company. Earlier this year, the Dublin Port Company announced without prior warning they would be restricting the number of cruise ships entering Dublin Port from 2021 to 80. Most of these 80 cruise ships will be small vessels carrying between 250 to 400 passengers. Only 35 will be of the large cruise ships that we've become accustomed to see in Dublin Port. The Dublin Port Company announced its decision to effectively destroy the cruise industry without any prior warning, consultation or engagement with the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport, this committee, local businesses, Dublin City Council or any other ports, namely Belfast, Waterford and Cove, who will be severely impacted by this decision. The cruise companies market Ireland as a destination, and in addition to Dublin, the cruise ships stop off at Belfast, Waterford and Cove. Without access to Dublin Port, cruise companies will no longer stop at these other ports and will take their business to other European destinations. The Dublin Port Company completely failed to communicate its decision or the flawed rationale behind it to any of the local, national or international stakeholders involved. Furthermore, the Dublin Port Company immediately disbanded Cruise Dublin, withdrew from cruise trade associations Cruise Ireland, Seaside Cruise Global and Cruise Europe. This will have a dramatic impact on their chances of persuading cruise companies to return to Ireland in the future. The reaction of the international cruise industry community to this has been total shock, and many have commented how badly Ireland's reputation has been damaged and will have a dramatic knock-on effect for years to come. Many cruise companies have said that they will never return to Ireland. Furthermore, Dublin Port's decision sends out a signal to the tourism industry across the world that tourists in Ireland are not welcome. Thank you again for allowing us to come here today and to make our presentation.
Thank you. Can I just, before I open it to the members, would any other of your colleagues like to make any additional commentary before we open it to questions? Yeah. Mr. Guiney, yeah, go ahead.
Just the cruise, Lorcan has given a very good outline of the situation. I think one of the most significant aspects for us in terms of Dublin Town is the engagement by cruise tourists with the independent retail sector in the city centre. So we have a visitor assistance team, and they visit each of the ships that come in. So we have a good handle on what people are doing when they arrive here. So roughly half will go on a pre-organised excursion right throughout the country, and Niamh will be able to give you more detail on that. The other half spend their time in Dublin city centre. So they will take the on-off, hop-on, hop-off tours, but they spend quite liberally. And they very much engage with independent retailers, and they have a strong interest in buying Irish designed product. They buy a lot of craft, art, jewellery, Irish fashion, Irish manufactured fashion. So their spend is actually quite significant, and certainly the feedback we would have got is that this type of tourist actually kept a lot of businesses in business during the dark days of the recession. It was the tourist turning up and spending and they can spend several thousand, was the make or break for quite a number of those businesses, and indeed the places where they source their product. So from our perspective, the spend is extremely significant and would lead to, we believe, at a time when retail is challenged with online, it could lead to closures within the independent sector.
Yeah, if I may say, as Lorcan mentioned, we would be at the forefront. So basically, we would be the people that deal with the cruise lines directly, my company. I personally have been in this business for 25 years and I've seen it grown. I did the very first call in Belfast in 1996 when there was one. This year we'll have 150 calls. The same in all of the other ports. So I have taken great pride in being a part of growing this business and creating jobs, as Richard has said, and building an economy through the cruise industry, a very strong economy. Obviously, from my point of view, I find it very disappointing the way it was handled, the way it was communicated to our clients, but also to us. We would have heard it secondhand. Our clients heard it secondhand. They've invested a lot of time and indeed money in this country. They have favoured Ireland over other regions. Remember, cruising is a movable asset. They can move, they can go where they want. But Ireland is popular. They sell out all of their cruises and they want to sell Ireland. They want to sell Dublin, but they also want to sell all of Ireland. However, Dublin is the #1 attraction. If Dublin is not necessarily on an itinerary, they will not call to the other ports. It's like going to France and not visiting Paris, or going to the UK and not visiting London. Dublin is the seller, it's the marquee port. From our point of view, as I say, Richard touched on it there, but during the recession, this was the one part of the tourism industry that continued to grow. It still is. It's the fastest growing sector of the tourism industry in the world. If you only have to look at the order books, there's like 100 and something ships on order until 2026. So it's huge. It's huge for Ireland. The guests love Ireland, and I just feel that this land that's known as the Céad Míle Fáilte, we're closing the door at a time where there's uncertainty with Brexit. I don't mean to be bringing up the whole Brexit topic, but let's be honest, who knows where we will be after Brexit. Yet we feel we are in a position to say no to a sure thing, and from our point of view, that's just not really acceptable. We need to try to find a way where cargo and tourism can live alongside and flourish and grow. We are an island. We have ports, north, south, east and west. To me, cargo can come anywhere. Guests want to see our capital city. They want to spend. They want to go to Guinness. They want to go to these stores. They want to go to Carroll's. They want to go to Brent Thomas. They want to see Trinity. Cargo, it doesn't matter where they come in. We need to find a way that all of our industries can flourish and grow together.
Okay. Mr. Rankin, yeah.
Thank you very much. So I represent Retail Excellence, and in so representing 2,000 retailers right across the country. And I think it's important to talk about the unseen hand and the unseen damage that this move by Dublin Port, this unilateral move, without any consultation, will have, should it go through, in every town, certainly every town on the tourism trail, which is in every single county in Ireland. So this, and I think my colleagues would agree, has been a fast growing business and trade. It has grown quickly from 2012 or so, and employment has grown with it. So there are now tens of thousands of our employees that cruise ships industry sustains, and this will simply do away with it. I think the details, and Eve will talk about this a little bit later, but the importance of this is that the cruise industry depends on certainty and being able to book some years in advance. And what this move has introduced is absolutely removing that certainty. And in doing so, the cruise industry is unable to plan ahead and therefore has to look at other alternatives. I think the damage that it is doing to the Irish tourism brand is scary and, if we're not careful, irreparable. I think it's useful to look at the arguments that Dublin Port have put forward in support of this decision. And they've talked about, when pushed, they will talk about freight and the importance of freight to the port, to the exclusion of everything else. Now, retailers, better than anybody else, will be familiar, will appreciate the importance of freight. but it's simply untenable to do away with the cruise ships coming into Dublin at the expense of freight. The two must coalesce as they would in every major port, in every major city, certainly in Europe. I think another one of the motivations that was put forward was Brexit. And certainly when this was first mooted and when this was first put forward, we were right in the crosshairs of Brexit. Now, frankly, 31st of October is a date that is coming at us, but nobody knows what that entails. And yet we're seeing some very, very concrete and very damaging moves being put in place by Dublin Port without the sort of consultation that is required. This is a national strategic utility, and it must have the sort of consultation that is required. In media commentary about this particular issue, Dublin Port were big on describing the importance of Brexit and how they needed to prepare themselves for Brexit, and rightly so, and talked about some of the huge vessels that were being brought in, the so-called Brexit busters. What wasn't talked about there was the damage that was being done to our tourism, our vital tourism industry. In the course of that, and it was a Morning Ireland interview that I recall hearing, they talked and they admitted to the use of space in Dublin Port, which was perhaps less, shall I say, perhaps less than optimal. And they were frank about that and optimal, and admitted that. Well, I would suggest that that space is looked at carefully, and every ounce of space is looked at for freight before such a drastic decision is made. I would just, in conclusion, I would talk about the type and profile of tourists that cruise ships bring in as opposed to flight. These are, needless to say, and you'll appreciate this, high net worth individuals with dollars and euros to spend. And particularly in respect of my members, they're exactly the type of profile of visitors and tourists that we need to bring to this country. Instead, it seems that we're making a decision that is diametrically opposed to that. And I would conclude by saying that now is the time to act, and we look to this House to assist in that regard.
Okay, just before I open it to the members, I just want to say that we have agreed as a committee that we will be visiting Dublin Port, and clearly for members to see, I've already seen the issues there and I'll address them myself, but as the members will speak now, but that we will be putting your points to Dublin Port. But can I just ask you one question? Have you physically gone there as a group? Have you met with them? Have they shown you the issues as they see them?
So yes, is the short answer. We met with them as this issue emerged.
Yeah.
And we had a 1.5-hour discussion teasing out the issues. It's very clear, and obviously that meeting took place in Dublin Port.
Did you actually, you visited the port and saw the new facilities, the customs, the agriculture, all of that?
We visited the offices. The offices took place, but my colleagues have not toured.
You've seen all of that. That's fair enough. Okay, sorry, Senator O'Mahony.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. And I mean, obviously, as somebody who hasn't the in-depth knowledge that you've just given, but did hear the news that they were restricting the cruise traffic, if you like. On the face of it, just something doesn't seem to add up here. That was my initial impression when I heard it through the media. And obviously, as you mentioned, the Brexit and the increased cargo issue. You know, it's a great problem to have, if you like, in the overall, that it seems to be Dublin Port can cherry pick what business they want, or that's what seems to be happening. I suppose from the point of view of the important thing is where to go from here, because I know when the recession, and that has been mentioned, but when the recession did hit, I mean, tourism was the saviour of the economy in this country, and we had groups, when I was chairman of this committee, we had groups in here, if you like, providing welcome news to us that they were trying to, at every level, increase the cruise traffic into Ireland. So I suppose basically what you seem to be suggesting has happened. It's cargo versus cruise, and cargo has won out. Just from a Dublin Port perspective, is cargo more profitable for? Yes. So that's a major factor. And secondly, I suppose, if,
It's more profitable to Dublin Port.
yes, that's the
Not
point.
to the economy,
Yes,
I think.
to the
So
port.
I suppose they use this argument that, well, we actually make more money out of tonnage, so whatever the ship weighs and the cargo that it holds is worth an awful lot of money to them as passengers. But they have admitted in their own documents, and brief documents to the Minister, that they appreciate to the wider economy that it is more profitable. And I suppose before they closed down all their social media, they were trumpeting how much and how good it was for the local economy in Dublin. But part of this process, they took down all their social media because we were actually retweeting the positive stuff that they'd put up about it, and they didn't particularly like that because they'd gone out and told everybody, we've after grown this, we're marvellous, this is worth 50 million to Dublin, it's going to be worth an awful lot more. And then they had to take that down then because obviously they've changed, you know.
Since this has happened or announced or whatever, what engagement, is it just the one meeting?
We haven't actually met the CEO, Eamon O'Reilly. We have written to him, we have requested a meeting, and we have written to the Minister and requested a meeting, and we haven't had a meeting with the Minister yet.
So in other words...
We did have a meeting with the Lord Mayor, who said he would facilitate a meeting with the port, as he's Admiral of the port, but that never materialised either.
So what you're saying is that there was no consultation in advance and there's no explanation?
Absolutely not. It came as a complete shock to us because myself and Niamh and a few others would have attended different events and award ceremonies where they won an award for
They won Port of the Year in Sea Trade in just September last year.
Just on the overall cruise industry, if you like, what connection, in other words, how many ships come to Dublin and then go to Belfast or to...
Probably up to 80% will do them all. So we would always say, as Cruise Ireland, I'm one of the founder members of Cruise Ireland, that for the ports, there's always a port before and a port after. So Dublin, as I say, is the marquee port.
What are the other ports?
The main ports then would be Cove and Belfast. But we also have Waterford, we have Foynes, we have Killybegs, we have Galway. We had a ship in Sneem the other day, we had Bantry, we have outer-lying ports. But the main ports are those three ports.
And are all of the ports in unison with your view on what's happening in Dublin?
none of the ports were consulted in advance either. And obviously this is going to affect their business going forward as well. None of them were asked, none of us as members of Cruise Ireland who've gone out there jointly and collectively to advertise Ireland as a cruise destination, we're told in advance. None of us were consulted. None of us, we all as business people appreciate that the port makes more money from cargo, but I have worked on cruise ships all over the world. That's the same in every port. However, they still manage to increase both alongside each other, and that's the issue, is that, they haven't, how do they not recognise, if last year they were still out selling Dublin as the #1 destination, where did all of this come from? Why is it just suddenly they've stopped it? Brexit has been how many years in the running? They've known about this.
Sorry, just a few quick questions because I don't... The spend of a typical, or the average spend, what would that be? Have you...
So the figures vary quite significantly. The port's own figures will show about €250 per head that comes in, and that's in a day. But we're aware of very significant spends amounting to tens of thousands from some of the cruise passengers, particularly on some of the ships like the World, where you're dealing with extremely high-end, high-worth people. And as I said, they will specifically, they'll go to the likes of the Paris Court Town Centre, they'll go to St William Street, they'll go to and they may spend several thousand, but you're looking at, on average, probably in the region of €250, €300 per head, but some will spend a lot more.
Sorry, I'm rushing because I'm conscious. Have I another minute or two?
Per day, I should say.
Well, you have
the turnaround. Sorry, how quick is it? What is it? Is it 2-3 days? Or?
We're only here for 1 day, but that's the point that actually I think we really need to highlight is that Dublin, Ireland has now become what's called a turnaround port, so a home port. So now cruises are starting and ending in Dublin. Now this is a whole different kettle of fish because all of those people fly in. So you're talking.
How many people?
So, for example, I looked after the turnaround for the celebrity ship the other day. That's 3,260 were on board. They all flew in through Dublin Airport, stayed in hotels either in Ireland or in Dublin prior, joined the ship, and another 3,200 disembarked and did the exact same thing. Now, we have 5 of them this year, we have 10 next year, and they were planning on 20 for the following year. That's just one company. We have other corporations who wanted to use Dublin as a home, but that's massive money. Right. That's huge money, because the airport are making here as well, the hotels and everything else.
Sorry, just one final question. Thanks for your indulgence. Is there a solution to their ambitions? In other words, is there compromise possible here? Is it either ye win the day or they win the day? Is there any mid-ground?
We'd like to think Ireland could win rather
yes.
First of all, engage with the stakeholders, be it the cruise ships, the business groups in the country. The issue there is we keep getting conflicting documents. So they put out one document in March there, which points out very Niamh said they're not taking any turnarounds from 2021, so that business is gone, and that's probably the most lucrative business, so that's gone. But then, when they were briefing the minister a couple of weeks later, they're saying that how valuable the turnaround business is. Kind of saying, well, hold it. On one side, you're telling people you're not going to take it. You're briefing the minister and telling them it's very valuable, but it's all very vague. It's, I said, they're saying we'll have 80 ships, but when you look into it, then those 80 ships become, some of them have 100, 150 people. They're part on Sir Bertha and Sir John Rogerson's Quay. So they're very small ships. So the bigger ships, they're saying probably the capacity is about 36. But the problem is, they said there's only 3 days we'll accept those ships. And then when you go to book it, they say, well, we can only actually pick 2 of those 3 days, because just in case freight, we need it for freight, because we're looking at a couple of years out. We can only, and then obviously because Dublin's tidal, it's restricted when those ships can actually come in.
Yeah, which means there's a knock-on effect in the other ports.
The other ports.
If it's tidal, so, they have to skip other ports.
So we'd like honest answers, like to yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Sorry for the
No, you can continue on there. Yeah, just.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Welcome our guests to the committee today. I'm surprised and disappointed to hear that you haven't had a meeting with Minister Ross. Because on the floor of the Dáil he gave a clear commitment that he would meet with you, and I followed that up with correspondence with his office, who again confirmed to me that he would meet with you. So
he did meet with the Cruise Ireland members and the ports, but he hasn't met collectively with the group. He did meet with all of the ports, with Belfast. And with Cove, and I believe Fáilte Ireland as well. So the issue is he hasn't met with the All Ireland Cruise Ship Action Group collectively, the members.
Okay, so can I ask then, who does your group represent?
Well, I suppose if you take it, Retail Excellence Ireland with an All Ireland.
I know who each. I know Richard Guiney of. I know Retail Excellence Ireland, but in terms of your group. Who do your overarching group?
Yeah,
who do you?
Everybody involved in cruise. So, for example, all of the coach companies that provide transportation, all of the guiding organisations that provide guiding on the day,
all the cruise operators,
all of the cruise operators, all of the visitor attractions. That cruise is the #1 income for St Patrick's Cathedral, for example. We give them the most business. Cruise does. They will tell you that. So we represent all of these interests.
So we're really representing the people whose livelihoods depend on cruise.
Okay. And on a national issue, I think it's important to say that we represent people in right across the country as well, and all those interests.
Companies, all of them.
I'm just trying to I suppose, put it on the record exactly who it is you're representing, and all the cruise ships that come in, the 150 in the year, are signed up to your group. The various tourist attractions signed up to your group, Retail's Excellence Ireland here. I just want to make sure that's on the record. And I think, Chairman, that we as a committee should follow up on this meeting and request that the Minister fulfil his promise that was made on the floor of the Dáil, and indeed subsequently to me to meet with this group.
Just on that point, you have requested separately a meeting with Minister Ross. Yes. have any, while he's met other groups, he hasn't met you.
Yes, I contacted his office just before Easter, and the response was that we just need to wait until Easter's out of the way. We're now nearly in
So
June.
it's implicit that he will meet.
It must take longer Easter holidays than the rest of us.
Right, okay. He's Easter.
In relation to this meeting, we got a briefing document from the department, and I suppose it's quite clear in relation to the briefing document the independence of Dublin Port in relation to its operation, its relation to making decisions in how it operates. And it says, although the department's officials continue to monitor developments at Dublin Port in respect to its cruise tourism business and capacity, these are ultimately operational matters, commercial decisions for the board and in the management of the Dublin Port Company. Dublin Port Company is an independent commercial company, and the Minister has no day-to-day role in relation to that.
If I may, Deputy, just to respond just on that particular point. So in making our submission on this issue, I consulted the annual report of Dublin Port, and it's clear at the back that the Minister is on the board and is in a position of influence on matters of such importance and clearly of such national importance. And it's for that reason that we want to meet him and we ask for him to intercede. It's rather frustrating for my members to see a response like that, which is kind of washing their hands of the issue.
It is a piece of major infrastructure for the city of, for the whole of Ireland. And the fact that they feel that to some degree they can suck in the more profitable freight business, because there's plenty of capacity from what we've seen around the other parts, and other parts around the country seem to have plenty of capacity for freight, and Dublin Port is sucking all that in. Like, they're setting up a cost-benefit analysis on a cruise terminal that will cost 100 million, and what they're saying is we make 2 million a year. It is a small enough season, it's only over a couple of months, we make 2 million a year. So the cost-benefit analysis is set up to fail. It's never going to come back and say Dublin Port Company, as a company, should build a port terminal. So it's a major piece of infrastructure. Now, Dublin Port have looked for central governments to fund it as a piece of infrastructure. But this idea that when this report comes out, we'll look at it. And the problem is we're being told we will have cruise business for 2 years, it will decline for the 2 years while we're doing the works, and then we will grow it back again. But why would you leave all Cruise Ireland, Cruise Europe, leave all the cruise groups? Why would you close down your social media if you intend growing this business back up after you do your works? So they've already said there'll be no turnarounds after 2021. So that's not a... And the answers we get, and the briefing document that they gave the Minister was very vague. We might, we will, we'd like to, and that's the kind of answers we're getting. So we'd love to get Eamon O'Reilly, into a committee like this, and people to ask him hard questions and ask him to answer, what is your intention? And again, everything is always, well, we might need...
I understand that, and I suppose my concern would be that while they have commissioned an economic cost-benefit analysis, they're taking a decision preceding that, the publication of that. And what if that comes back, as Mr. O'Connor just said a moment ago, not shown
set up to fail.
Set up to fail. I mean, none of us need this. We already know the economical return for the port is minute. We all know that, and that's the same in every port around the world. It's the greater economy, and they are, as Lorcan has just said, they are a facilitator for bringing in tourists into our country, like the airport. If the airport overnight decided that it was cheaper or easier to bring in cargo planes than have to look at every passport or whatever, would we just accept it? Like, it's the same thing but on a smaller scale, but it's not smaller because it's growing. So my question is, how can one of our largest pieces of infrastructures, i.e. the port, make that decision based on the fact that they're affecting so many other people countrywide? I just don't understand how we can sit back and say, well, okay, they're a commercial company, they make that money, and it's okay, we'll just let that go and hopefully things will be okay. It's not okay. If it happened in the airport, it wouldn't be okay.
And just to follow up on that, I think Niamh is very well placed to talk about the urgency of this issue, and that you're very closely...
I've been out to Miami, I've been to LA, I've been called out urgently. They're literally making a decision by August for the turns. If this decision isn't overturned, they're relocating their ship to Amsterdam. and gone is that business. And every time a turnaround is planned, it's a 5-year procedure. They put 5 years worth of advertising, marketing. You can imagine the money that goes into, these ships are full, right? There's 3,500 flying in to join these ships. That's a lot of marketing on their side in the US. It's 5 years worth of advertising and marketing. If they move to Amsterdam, they're gone. Why would they come back when Dublin Port say, oh, we think we have room for you now? They won't come back. And with them go all the other cruise lines, because that's what happened. They're like sheep, they'll all go. And the issue is we need answers now. We need them. Everybody says, oh, it's 2 years away. It's not. They make the decisions now.
Except that there's a long lead in time.
It's a long lead in time. They have to...
The reduction in the... Currently, it's about 150.
We're at 172 in Dublin this year.
172 in Dublin this year, and the proposal is to reduce that down to 80, and I accept that part of that...
35 large ones.
There's 30, yeah. I think that's a really...
I asked them... I'm just conscious I have to be concise because I've colleagues coming in. That reduction, you're saying currently it's worth €50 million per annum to the economy. Have you quantified how much of a reduction to the general economy will be per annum?
I think if you look at the numbers, you're probably looking at about between 30 and 35 million, because you're looking at roughly 1/6 of the. You're looking at less than 30 ships of the 3,500 size, and as Lorcan pointed out, of the 80, you're looking at the rest are carrying about 200, which is a long way short of the 3,500. So you are looking at bringing this down to about 1/6 or 1/5, 1/6 of the number. So you're looking at 35 million, maybe up to 40 million in terms of the loss to Dublin alone. But if those boats don't come to Dublin, they're not going to Cove and they're not going to Belfast. And this is one of the issues that's really given rise to some concern for us, is that we're given numbers, but as soon as you start scratching the surface, you find that actually that position is quite nebulous. And the other thing that I think that the committee does need to take into account as well is that reputational damage to Ireland is being done, because, as Niamh said, the large cruise liners made a decision to use Dublin as a home port, and they actually saw that they could grow Dublin as the home port, that it would become a major hub. When they made that decision, they started spending a lot of their own money marketing Ireland to people in America and internationally. And then within a number of months, without consultation with them, the decision was made by the port to cease that trade. So they've spent money in good faith marketing Ireland, so money marketing Ireland to very wealthy tourists. And then they find that the decision has been basically reversed. Now, we've got some contact and anecdotal evidence back to us from people who are active particularly in the North American market, that there's a lot of upset within the tourist industry over there. And basically, it's Ireland has been, not Dublin or Dublin Port, but Ireland. What's going on in Ireland is the question. So I think we do need to consider that reputational damage as well.
Thank you. Just, I'm focusing on the briefing document we got, because I want to give you an opportunity to maybe to answer some of the points that were put to us. But one of the points is it's in relation to the meeting between the Minister and Dublin Port Company on the 20th of March 2019, and it appears that part of the suggested solution to what's been proposed would be that there would be additional capacity and to work with the Port of Cork and working with Belfast Harbour in relation to taking on some of the additional business. And they said the department officials are maintaining contact with Belfast Harbour with a view to supporting their efforts to retain cruise tourism on the island of Ireland and maximise any additional opportunities arising.
And they have. And the department, I know they have, because obviously I sit on Cruise Ireland, and I know the department have written to them to say that they will support them. But ultimately, we and the ports themselves also are very aware of the fact that they cannot replace Dublin. that Dublin wants to be visited. So ultimately that's the issue. And also when you consider turn business, Dublin is the international airport. The reason why they chose Dublin was the proximity of the airport to the port, the pre-clearance at Dublin Airport, and the huge airlift between North America and Dublin. So whilst Belfast and Cork, the two ports are amazing in their work, both of them are undergoing development at the moment, which again is a little bit ironic considering they weren't aware of Dublin's stance, so they're putting all this money in to ports and they may be losing, well, they will be losing. Absolutely, it's great. If we thought that they would take all the business, that's great, but ultimately it's like what I said, they want to see Dublin. These cruise guests want to see Dublin. If, for example, one ship, for example, even the cruise line said it to me in March, if one cruise line can get one of those 2 days and another one can't, which ship are they going to pick? They're going to pick the one that can get to Dublin. So the cruise line's losing out on this valuable revenue. So, you know, Dublin is the top seller. All of the cruise lines will tell you that.
No, I accept that. Just finally, then, is there any capacity or to deal with, say, Dunleary Port and use Dunleary as an outlet or an outreach?
Yeah, they are actually out there today meeting with Princess Cruises. Yeah, we can't use it. Yeah,
I accept that.
So they could never be a turnaround
But
port.
you're not going to put people on a tender bobbing up and down and bring them in. It's like you're going back to the Titanic days.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you know,
they won't. It won't solve the turnaround issue.
It won't solve. And again, the turnarounds is where the money is really going forward. You know.
They can't bring in all that luggage.
The bottom line, your suggestion and your solution is that there is to try and divert some of the freight away from Dublin Port to the other ports.
I mean, Greenore, Drogheda, Rosslare. I mean, we've had communication from Rosslare. I mean, I'm not too sure what I can do as a tour operator, but they've contacted us looking to see how they can help with this issue as regards. So I've told them to contact who they need to, but there's Greenore Port, there's Drogheda, they're all ports that have space, you know, whereas the cruise ships have to come into Dublin. You know, I mean, they're only here for a day, so it's not an option for them to drive from Rosslare to Dublin to do a day tour. You know, it really isn't. So that's the issue there. But I mean, all the other ports are willing to take the extra business, but they also are very, very aware that this is a dark cloud hanging over their business as well.
And potentially there's a silver lining here for ports that might have been marginalised in the past. I happen to know Drogheda a little better than the others, but you know, there's fantastic facilities there that could actually afford a solution for freight and really help those the surroundings of those ports. Let's face it, the tourists want to come into the capital city. It's one of the real advantages that we have between sea and mountains. We're all set up for cruise ships, and we just wanted to continue. That's all we asked for.
Just on that though, the port, this isn't guaranteed business either, freight business going forward. So when you look at the briefing documents, again given to the Minister or anything that they've put out, it's not guaranteed freight. So we're going to turn away the tourist business and the cruise business in case we need it for freight. So they're turning away guaranteed money in case they need it, and that's in their own documents.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of we have to have that space and we need it because of the freight. We need it just in case. And again, the 3 days became 2 days because we might need one of those other days for freight, and we want to keep it open just in case.
Yeah, and they've said that when the Coach Tourism and Transport Council met with the port, they were asked, one of the members actually very specifically asked, why can't we have the third day as a start, you know, of going back on some of the plans? And the answer was, we need to keep that third day on the off chance we have freight. And he was asked again, well, if you're guaranteed a booking 2 years in advance by a cruise ship, why would you refuse it on the off chance you may need it for freight in 2 years' time? And the answer was, we need it for freight. So to me, there is a definite line here that needs to be addressed. There has to be questions asked, as you say, about the management of space in the port. I mean, I'm no expert, but if we could visit that, I think it would be very valuable. And also a way to try to see how both can grow. We should not have to choose between cargo and freight and tourism. You know, in a few years' time, if we hit a recession and those cargo ships aren't coming in, nor will the cruise ships, because they'll be in Amsterdam, they're movable assets. So we need to be very mindful that this current stance is very short-sighted and tunnel vision.
Okay, just on, I'm an expert on.
Just trying to understand one point that Deputy Trine made there about Dunleary, right? I mean, for centuries it's been used, as a passenger port. So
They're too big. They're too big.
Ships are too big.
Their drafts. Yeah, their drafts are too big to come into the harbour.
Right.
So they.
So let's put it this way: the boats that brought generations of people away from our coast to the
Oh, they're
UK,
baby ships. Yeah.
No, they might very well be baby ships.
Yeah.
But they were there.
Yeah.
So you don't seem to see any solution for any of these ships, regardless of size, in Dunleary.
No,
Is
there
that what
are
you're
some
saying?
going. Apparently, we've
Yeah.
45 ships going to Dunleary
Right, yeah.
as a result, but they're much smaller and also they're all weather susceptible. So if we have any kind of winds or bad weather, the call gets aborted. So that in itself is not good for the guests. They don't make it into Dublin.
No, but I'm just trying to say that I just find your narrative. Well, I'll let other people talk, but I find that I just don't understand why Dunleary wouldn't be an obvious place.
Well, it is an obvious place, but they can't dock. They have to anchor, and then they take, as Lorcan said, the little boats, what are called tenders, in. So it's a hugely slow process.
Okay, well, maybe it's changed since I went over there.
There's 3,500 people, though. That takes a long time.
I think it's going to make the point to you that you have different sized crafts you're talking about coming in.
Yeah.
Some of them would suit.
Absolutely, and they are going in.
So you quantify that as 40?
At the moment, there's 45.
Is that 45 out of the 175?
No,
No,
that's an addition.
different ones. Different ones, in addition.
No, because the other point I make is that I just want to make this point that I have been to see Dublin Port, and I realise the massive stress they're under.
Yeah.
In the context of the Brexit, about the new areas they showed me for putting in
Terminal
customs. Just to
7,
finish
yeah.
my point, if you don't mind. Their customs and excise, their agriculture, the fact that they have a huge inland port now, I think up near Dublin Airport. So to say that they're not trying to, to remove activity from the port is not actually true. They're making very significant efforts there. But what they explained to me was that when they have a cargo coming in, they need the dock, and they must get that, because if they don't, the industry or the people that depend on those goods, that they can't tie up that spot for you guys forever. That's their problem. They would love to do it, but priority from their perspective is with the economy. Now, I hear everything you're saying, and I acknowledge the huge importance your activity is. So, but I think myself that there's a huge need for you guys to meet with the key decision makers there to get absolute clarity on all of these issues. And if we can facilitate that, I think we should. But, sorry, Deputy Munster is next.
Just in relation to, you said that Cruise Ireland had met with the Minister, and I'm just wondering what was his particular stance on it. You had outlined the alternatives of using other ports like Drogheda, Greenore, that sort of thing. Did he give any commitment to examine those options? Or what liaison had he with it? Because it seems, although the port is state-owned, we don't seem to have very little input in it. I know it's an independent commercial business, but the fact, tourism and the need to build on tourism is at stake here too.
Exactly.
So to make the decision, you had said that most of you had learned of it second-hand.
Yes.
Doesn't seem right in the first instance, because it's a decision that will have massive implications over the next couple of years. But I'm just wondering, did he give a commitment, or was that, I know you've said, I think, that you haven't met, or you've requested meetings with the CEO also of the Dublin Port.
He has met. The Minister has met with the CEO, and the Minister has also met with the Chairman of Cruise Ireland, who's also the Commercial Director at the Port of Cork, and he's met with Belfast Port, or Belfast Harbour as they're known, and also Tourism Ireland, the CEO of Tourism Ireland. And I know that there were some of these issues were discussed, and the Minister did promise to revert back. So as far as I'm aware, that's still ongoing. I wasn't included in that meeting, so I'm not aware, because the Chairman of Cruise Ireland, that was his role as well as the Port of Cork role. So apparently they are still in discussions, but from our point of view, I'm I'm not too sure if any of the other ports have even been contacted to see how they could help with freight, because obviously we would have connections in those ports, so we haven't heard that that's the case. But I think the whole thing here is we need to stress how urgent this is, that if we don't get it looked at now, it's too late. And like, I'm extremely aware of the points of, I'm in the port every day, like I'm known as the harbour queen. I'm there, I see the constraints, I see how busy it is. I understand all of that, and nobody is denying that, and we all need cargo, we need everything that's brought in, we all avail of it. We understand that, and nobody is questioning that. We're just questioning how we can't try to sit down with the other ports and see, maybe, I'm not talking about Belfast and Cork, I'm talking about the Rosslairs and the Greenora and the Drogheda, and see if this cargo can be distributed to at least, you know, I mean, I understand they're under huge constraints. I've seen it. I've seen Terminal 7 now with all of the Brexit inspections. But I just think it's nobody has sat down around a table and with the other ports to see if there's anything we can do.
Yeah, it just seems, that's my point. If there are, I mean, if they come back and say that it's totally impractical, you know, it's not going to be fit for purpose and all that sort of thing, but the lack of engagement or, you know, investigation as to see what options are out there, you know, that's kind of worrying, whether, you know, that hasn't been to the fore in this, or that you haven't been included in those.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and also, as we mentioned, rejoining the tourism organisations, like that's the bit that we want answers on as well. Why, if your intention was to, you know, to come back stronger as a port and provide more berths going forward, why would you pull out of all of the advertising organisations? Would you not be more, you know, in the front line, reassuring your clients that we're going to come back? This is for the good, the greater good, that we're investing in the port, that we're going to build a new terminal. Why aren't they out there telling their clients that? There's something that doesn't add up.
You're back to its potential business. Again, that isn't. It's not. There's no guaranteed freight business there that he can say that the Dublin port are going to get. So he's saying, I'm not going to take the cruise business. I'm kind of hoping I'll get this freight business, or, you know, just in case the freight business comes. I just wanted to one thing. There was a statement from Eamon O'Reilly on the 11th of April, because there was talk about how the pressure they are in land at that Dublin port. And this is the direct quote from him, from their website. Air container terminals are operating at half the target land utilisation we set out for them in our franchise policy in 2014. So that's 5 years ago. One of the impacts of Brexit is that we have to achieve these targets sooner. The Dublin Port Dwell Time Initiative provides essential financial initiatives to move cargo through the port quickly. So basically, people are able to have rusty containers there for a year and no one charged them for it. And 5 years ago, they set out a policy document where it said, we need this land, we need to utilise this land, you need to use it better. So if you're going to store containers there, we're going to start charging you for them. But 5 years later, they're only starting doing it now. And so this idea that we don't have space, we can't do this, you're admitting yourself that 5 years later, when you identified that this was a problem, you still haven't done anything about it. You're only starting to look at it now. So this idea that there's no space down there, in particular for the turnarounds, the temporary solution at the moment is a kind of 100,000 square foot marquee which they put up. So a bit like an airport, check-in, people come, they go through security scanner, check their baggage in, and then they get bussed to the ship. So for the turnarounds, that's put up, the cruise companies pay for that. So again, the amount of, if you're saying there's not enough land to do that, we've loads of land with empty rusty containers that if we got people to actually pay for the use of that land, we'd have that space. We could put one of those marquees there and keep doing those turnarounds.
Yeah, I think Lord is absolutely right. This is a business decision. It's a business strategy that's been outlined by Dublin Port, and it has every right to do so. But the knock-on effect on a national basis is such that surely we can't allow that to happen.
Yeah, well, tourism is you know, is paramount importance, particularly at a time with Brexit and all of that. But just, you know, and more people are. Never been on a cruise myself, but more people are. You know, there was another question here, or in the document that we were furnished with. Dublin Port argues that if it was to cater for large numbers of cruise ships in excess of 200 in the future, new berths will have to be constructed at North Wall Quay extension. This will require co-financing and or long-term financial guarantees from cruise lines. I'm just wondering, has that been put formally to you in any shape or form, and what's your thoughts on it?
It's in the briefing document to the Minister, but again, it's a lot of these things are vague. So on one hand, we were told at the start that there's going to be cut down for 2 years, and then we'll start building the business back up again. But the language used, if you like, from 24 to 25 is to increase the business towards 150. Now, I don't know whether that's 30 to 35 to 40. Increasing it towards 150 means nothing, kind of thing. There's no timescale put on that of getting it to 150 or commitment to say we will get back to, say, we're at 175 now, and we're talking about moving towards 150. So we don't actually know what that means. They're saying if they get the new terminal, but it would be definitely down to central government committing money towards it as a piece of infrastructure for the country, in the same way we build Lewis Cross City or we're building Metro.
So is your overall fear that if they persist down this road between 21 and 23, that there's no guarantee that they'll ever revert back, let alone increase? And you feel once the decision's made, and particularly when they're commercially, the other they feel is more commercially beneficial, as an that's
and it is difficult
in the long-term tourism. Yeah.
Carol's operating Cork and at Belfast, and we actually get 3 bites of the cherry. So we get a ship in Cork, we get the ship at Dublin, and then we get the ship in Belfast, and it's hugely beneficial. And the problem, we talk to local people in Cork and Belfast, and there is a kind of a feeling. Listen, ships have always stopped in Cove, ships have always stopped in Belfast. It'll keep happening. And we're kind, yeah, you will absolutely, and we'd be happy as anybody if we thought we could keep the same amount of business, in Cork and Belfast. But the reality of the situation is, when we talk to these cruise companies, they're saying Dublin is where people have to fly into an international airport. They're flying in from the States into Dublin Airport. Within 20 minutes from Dublin Airport, they can be in the port through the port tunnel and basically checking in to go onto the ship. And that's a huge selling point for the cruise companies, because other places, they fly into London, they have a 2-hour train journey or bus journey down to Southampton or whatever. So, again, you're back to, we need honest answers. If you're saying you actively want to grow the cruise business going forward, why close down all the cruise social media, and why leave all the cruise organisations? Surely, it's like renovating a shop where you'd say you're not going to annoy your customers or whatever. You want to keep them on board. You want to make sure that they're going to come back into you. You'd fly out, you'd talk to these people face to face. I think most of all the cruise companies, my understanding is, just got an email. Yeah. This is it.
We had to fly.
And we're also doubling the figures for the next. They were doubling the costs for the cruise companies actually for the next 2 years as well. So.
Could I just finally, Cahirlock, just maybe suggest, and if the committee supported, that perhaps as a committee we would write to the Minister requesting that, given the unanswered questions and all that's at stake, that both the Minister and he would request, if that is, well, given the importance of it, he should maybe request that the CEO of Dublin Port, given that the Minister's on the board, meet with the action group, because they're cross-representative of all of that's affected, and that the committee is asking, with a view to looking at possible alternatives or examining the feasibility of those alternatives, so that we don't, if there are alternatives to prevent this situation and the concerns around it, then they should be examined, so that if we as a committee, Cahirlock, I was just suggesting that as a committee, if we agree, I would suggest or propose that we would write to the Minister, just given, I'm not going to repeat it all again, but given all the concerns, and just for clarity and answers, and to examine all the alternatives. They may not be feasible, they may be impractical, but if there are alternatives, they should be examined. That, along with the CEO of Dublin Port, because that hasn't been, there's no engagement there. Grant, thanks. And with this group in particular, because they're cross-representative of all that could be affected.
I would agree with that, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I have another meeting now, so I have to.
Yeah, well, first of all, very welcome. And I was down in, because of the local elections, we've been out and about a lot more, and I was down in Cork, and it struck me that the proud county of Cork, which sees itself as the real capital, which but it's very rare where you hear Cork advocate for something in Dublin, and that was heard loud and clear, and they know the impact that that the decision will have on Cove and in Cork and the south. So I think that was very noticeable, and certainly noticeable to me. I think there's a balance to be struck here, and I'm hearing that from you as well. And there's a silo kind of approach being taken, and we can't afford to be in that kind of frame of mind, given the risks with Brexit. And I've got to say that the Port of Dublin did take Brexit very seriously, and we've got to acknowledge that. In fact, I think we also have to question why Rosslare was such a low priority in the National Development Plan, because that capacity and even relieving some of the congestion in Dublin would seem to be a very logical way of going. And I think there is a bigger picture to be looked at in relation to this. Clearly the Minister has influence on the Dublin Port, but there's a difference between influence and power, that influence is incredibly important for the overall economy. And I think it's really, I think there's other things that need to be considered. For example, it's, again, looking at the like of Cove and the role that it played, for example, historically, to see people wanting to come back as opposed to seeing it as a port of emigration, I think is gigantically important in terms of a story. And also I think in terms of the north and in relation to Belfast, we can't not see that, you know, where all of the concentration on the border and Brexit, there are other things that are going to be important, very practical things of looking at this all-Ireland economy after Brexit happens. And I think looking at the Port of Belfast from that point of view has an intangible positive that we have got to make sure that we don't lose. So I think there are other things that we need to be putting into this mix, as well as just looking at it from a Dublin Port point of view. But Dublin Port have to be looking also at their business case, and I think we have got to maybe meet with Minister Ross from the point of view of saying that that business case has to be recognised, and there has got to be some means of whether it's compensating for the, I don't know what it is, but there is an aspect there that I think is, if we're going to be fair and finding a balance, we have to look at the Dublin Port, the business aspect of Dublin Port as well. And I don't think we'll find a balance without that. I think it does sound like a committee writing to a minister who we could bump into in the corridor. Seems like a very kind of circuitous way of actually getting to talk to him. But I think we can each individually do that as well, and to try and press home the point that you're making about the timing and the urgency of this and the importance of meeting with you from that point of view. But I think there are wider things that need to be considered here as well. And I also did have a chance to talk to some people in the coach industry and can understand the different dynamic for them in relation to the cruise, the certainty of the cruise traffic for that industry. And it's a very important one from the point of view of both the operators and the people that work within the coach sector as well, which is really quite a good area of employment too. So, I think we heard you loud and clear. I think we know what we've got to do, but I think we have to. I think it's important that we understand there's a balance to be got here in relation to recognising that Dublin Port has been proactive in looking at the challenges of Brexit, but within those challenges, you know, we can't be leaving behind a sector of a really important industry. So it's, as I say, I think that's what we need to do.
So just on to go back to the Dublin Port, and we said it in our opening statement, they grew this business from nothing. So they recognised at the time, and we were in a recession, there wasn't much freight out there at the time, and they recognised that this was an area of growth, and it was an area that they could make money out of, and they had the space to do it. And the worry is now when we hit the next recession, and I definitely feel we're at the top of the curve, and we see it in business and in retail. You know, freight obviously is determined by the need within the economy. So the worry is that we won't need the space for freight, or we won't have as much freight coming in as we thought we would, but we'll have told these cruise companies, listen, you're not welcome, we don't want you anymore. And at that stage, we go back to them then and kind of say, oh, you remember us, we'd love your business back again. They'll turn around and say, I'm sorry, we've just moved somewhere else, and you know, it would take us years to get back to where we are now.
Deputy O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose from what I've been hearing, Chair, and what I've known the last few months, it's another example of when Dublin sneezes, the rest of the country gets a cold. As you're saying there, and I welcome our guests here for the afternoon for the informative discussion. And what you're telling us also is that in my own backyard, that the coves are going to lose out, right? And you know, when this news is breaking first, like back on, I thought maybe the problem with Cove was maybe the Photo Road, you know, the Photo Road, there's either one, and Farmer Couch colleague of mine is going to have done over at John Mulville, like, you know, the Photo Road is the only access to Cove, the island. But we see what the problem is and what and the impact it's going to cause. I have been to Cove, like when some of these big cruise liners have come down to Cork, and the phenomena it creates in the area, in the town and the hinterland, and the good news it does for the Middleton and the Blarneys, and of course, I don't know how you're allowed to canvass for to fill your coaches. I think there's some restriction how the canvas is for the passengers to go travelling, like, you know, but people do venture onto those coaches and do get out onto these historic sites and distilleries. But what I would ask, Chair, to tie down a few points here, like, is most of the questions have been answered, but I suppose I could safely say from what I'm hearing, the Dublin Port reacted too late to the threat of the Brexit issue as well. I think we've seen that last March when the government were fast-tracking emergency legislation through the Dáil on foot of an emergency Brexit no deal happening. Like, was this coming down? Had you been forewarned at all in the last couple of years that there was expansion programmes in Dublin Port? No. So we can safely say Brexit is the issue being used here. So could we say that if there is a proper deal in Brexit, you know, that you might get away with it, you know, that we might keep performing, because, you know, I think you can work hand in hand. The question I was going to ask, like, you know, is what is the health and safety record of these cruise liners coming to Dublin Port? Had there been any major incidents with cargo ships that, you know, up to now, like, you know, that the safety record would be good, like? Are you vacating your location maybe to facilitate other ferries, you know, the more road ferries, like, you know, to get the cargo from Dublin straight down to mainland Europe? Is that what you're maybe being pushed aside for? Because, you know, like, as some of the deputies mentioned previously, you know, the new Rosses, or the Ross layers should have been upgraded, and including my own Cork, like, you know, we see where we're opening up the access from Cork to Santander in Spain, like, you know, that's looking ahead, like, and hopefully. But I just think, like, you know, is that my concern is that when Dublin is in trouble, we all seem to suffer as well. Like, you know, it's sorry to see that happening. Like, I thought, hoping that maybe that Cove might get extra cruise liners when Dublin.
I'd love Cove to get extra cruise liners, like, and I'd love Belfast to get extra cruise liners. We're trading in both locations. The worry for us is, and we know ourselves from operating in Cork and Belfast, they're very small, tight-knit cities. So when a cruise ship comes in with 3,500 people and they arrive into the middle of Cork, it's a huge deal, and it's a huge business for that, and exactly the same in Belfast. In Dublin, they get it dispersed out a bit more, so it's not as obvious when a cruise ship is. It's substantial business in Dublin. But I would definitely say within Cork and Belfast, businesses will close once this happens, because it's just such a game changer when a ship comes in. It's just, as you say, it's 3,500 people arriving right onto your doorstep, and in the smaller cities, it's going to have a much bigger impact.
I would say that Niamh, and well done on what you've done, but you should get the Dublin Airport Authority on board with you.
I have written to them, but I haven't received a reply.
For example, there's many people like myself that didn't realise that you were actually filling the cruise liners here on this land, on this island, and
we have had comments back from other semi-state companies that they can't be seen to go against the numbers. So we had, I don't say which, but they were very much on board the campaign and attended the first lot of meetings. They went back, and their CEO said, absolutely not. You can't get involved in a conflict with another semi-state company. So again, and I would imagine DAA would probably be in the same position, in the sense of, they have to be able to run their own businesses, I suppose, without criticism from another semi-state company, I suppose.
But it does beg the question of where our tourist agencies are on this topic, and they've been conspicuous by their silence.
Yeah, and for the record, I have written to Dublin Airport Authority 3 times with no response. So.
Right. Chair, thank you, Chair, and I would support the proposal that we write to the Minister.
Of course, I don't see any issue with that.
He's good looking from the outside on other issues, like he could get involved here as well, Chair.
Well, that's great. I'll just make a few comments, if I may. I think everybody recognises the importance of your business, the employment, the hugely growing part of the economy it is. And at the same time, everybody realises that Dublin Port must primarily deal with exports, imports, and the land bridge is hugely important to our economy. And having been there recently and looked at it in some detail, the actual difficulty they have is that because of Brexit, if it's a harder Brexit than any of us would like, and none of us want it at all, it will mean delays to goods inwards and goods outward. And they're talking about trying to restrict it to a maximum delay of 30 seconds per vehicle. But that might sound like nothing, but it's actually a huge problem. And you can have huge congestion in the port and huge congestion in the city or whatever. So I believe, and I want to say here that contrary to, I know you have to see it to believe it, but I've been to Holyhead looking at the port facilities there and how they're dealing with Brexit, and to Dublin Port. And Dublin Port is doing a fantastic job to protect our economy, and that's absolutely crystal clear to me, and I'm sure will be to the members when we see that. Secondly, the additionality of extra space that they require, which you say you've seen, is absolutely very visible. Like there's acres and acres of new facilities there for vehicles to back up if they have to, and for inspection of cargoes, and separately for agricultural commodities. As I said earlier, they have an inland port now up at the airport. So I think they're all things that I think are hugely important, and they must come first. They must come first. But we must find a way of meeting your need as well. And I think it's by constructive engagement. Now, I don't know. I wouldn't accept that Board Falter wouldn't or couldn't express their view. We live in a democracy. And if they have a view, they should express it. And there's no hidden agenda from anybody in getting at the facts. The facts are, you have a very important business. We must support it if we can find a way to do it. But there is a priority in Dublin Port. But Dublin Port, in their plans, and it's in our document here, that they are saying that they have, and they will be, providing extra facilities for cruise ships. I think it's from 2025, I think it is. They'll have it back up to from 2024.
2026 is when they...
2026
is what they're saying. Potentially, we could have the new terminal.
But I think it's our job to see if that can be delivered earlier.
Could I just make
and that's subjective.
I'll just finish first, and I'll listen to you then, because I've listened to you, and I respect what you say, and I hope I just get my points across to you first, and I'm very happy to debate it with you. But to say that Dublin Port isn't concerned is not true. To say that they're not trying to find an alternative for you is also, because they are, and The question is, can we make that work faster? Is there, what they're saying is they have to provide new facilities at North Wall and so on, and that require co-financing or long-term financial guarantees from cruise lines. So, I mean, that's an indicator of looking for business commitments from your colleagues to develop this facility. So I just want to make the point to you that Dublin Port, and he did acknowledge it, are doing an awful lot of good and have been very productive to help your business. And I think, I think they're the points I want to make. So go ahead.
Just on that, I suppose, that last point, I suppose, we set up our camera day before Eamon O'Reilly met the Minister, and I suppose we hit out fairly hard. So he had this opportunity going into the Minister to come up with a briefing document. So this wasn't out before. So the decision had been made and decision. So again, it's easy to put something on down after the fact and say, well, this is what we hope to do and this is what we plan on doing, kind of thing. But again, this wasn't a strategy before he cancelled the cruise ships going forward.
Sure.
In relation to Fáilte Ireland, and I'm 30 years working in Carroll's, so going back to Frank McGee and the Dublin tourism days and Board Fáilte days, the only room, they're all set up primarily by hoteliers, and they only count tourists that stay in hotels. So a tourist that comes in and buys a cup of coffee or buys a gift or with any of the members isn't really valued, if you like, in the Dublin tourism figures or Fáilte Ireland figures. They basically look at bed nights and what somebody. Now the turnaround businesses where we could actually prove this. These are actually people who are actually going to stay. Yeah, but no, they're not going to stay. If they're in for a day, they're only in for 8 hours. They're not going to stay in a hotel or whatever. But they will shop in and they will get a cup of coffee and they will buy a gift or whatever. And that's where the rest of us. But if you look at the Fáilte Ireland, and we would have, as a business organiser, I'm part of Dublin Town as well, and I would have been part of Dublin City Business Association before that, and we would have criticised the Tourism Authority for not taking that into account. Like, let's get out of the hotel mentality bedroom situation and look at tourists coming in for the day, cruise ships, or whether it's people coming in on ferries over for a day from the UK, and let's look at that. That's all part of the tourism offering. So the idea that, and again, I think just that mentality is still within Fáilte Ireland, that unless it's a hotel bed night, it's not a proper tourist. They're not. But these people are contributing a huge amount into the economy.
There's no doubt about that at all, and that's because of your good efforts. So what I would say is that you need a constructive engagement. When I say constructive, is a plan that everybody signs up to.
Yeah.
You need a timeline that obviously suits you more than it does suit you now, because if we can facilitate or put together, and you're the people who can do that, the guarantees they're talking about there from cruise liners and so on. And I can just make this point, and that if you can engage and if we can assist that as an Oireachtas, I think that's our role, is to say, hey, look, Dublin Port and Board Fáilte or whoever, let's get this thing sorted out, and we'll do everything we can.
I genuinely believed that Dublin Port wanted to stick to that plan and go for it. I wouldn't even be here. Yeah. And the problem is, there's conflicting documents come out from Dublin Port. You can download them off their website or whatever. They're public documents, and they've come up with conflicting reports, and they've given vague answers. So we'll hope to, we'll try. And again, what we're looking is for some commitment. If Dublin Port are saying, no, listen, cruise ships are gone, we're never going to, that'd be one thing. But what they're saying at the moment is, no, we want to go to cruise business. But everything that they're doing behind the scenes suggests that they don't want the cruise business. So come out and be honest and tell the truth.
I think what they're actually saying, so to make this point, what they're saying, what they said to me, we weren't talking about the cruise ships when we met, we were looking at the Brexit issue, but they showed me, the number from an Oireachtas committee, the properties they had identified, which were presently occupied by private entities, which were port-owned properties, and they're actually ceasing their leases and they're putting them out. Yeah. So Dublin Port is actually putting people who have other activities in their port. They just wanted 100% port-related and run by them because they need all that space. But your point is right. So can I say that we'll do our best. I'll speak, make it my business to contact the Port Authority to get a meeting between you guys and them following this, and then we'll go and visit the port, I think, as soon as we can. That's
we're also
Sorry.
Right to the Minister, only.
Yes, of course. Oh, yeah, the Minister, of course. Oh, yeah, but it's clear, like, and again, the Minister has no role. It's a commercial company, and it's there in black and white. He has no role in the day-to-day, but he may have a role in finding funding. Or, well, I mean, that's the point.
Well, he has influence. He has influence, and
course
this is such an important decision. We ask. That's why we're going the political route, because we think it's so strategically important.
Comparing port to port, as I was in the privileged position to look at two big ports, one in Britain, one here. Like Dublin Port is miles ahead, and it's totally full. It really, really is. I just want to repeat that again.
Can I just say though, you mentioned Holyhead as the other port, right?
Yeah. Well, that's where the.
I mean, they're worlds apart. You know, I mean, Holyhead probably has 20 cruise calls a year. You know, I mean, everybody wants to go to Dublin. With all due respect to Holyhead, like.
Oh, no, I was looking at the export-import.
From the Brexit point of view. Oh yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
But these guys in Dublin are way ahead of the curve.
And absolutely they are, and I don't think any of us are denying that, and we all accept that, but our worry is if they knew, like we've known about Brexit for how many years now?
Well, we don't know.
No, but what we've known that we would have to have this structure put in place to a degree. We've known, everybody knows that, not the whole intricate details. But yet it was only actioned this year, obviously. But, you know, I would imagine that's been in the planning. So why all of a sudden, when the companies have invested in their turnarounds here, have they been told this? That's our question. Remember, as I said at the start, I'm doing this 25 years. It's like my reputation as well. I've gone out there through all of my own company funding to promote Ireland when Fáilte Ireland weren't members, when they didn't give me any funding or any of these colleagues beside me. I went out there and I promoted Ireland. I will say, not single-handedly, but along with the ports and my colleagues, we have created this industry in Ireland. Fáilte Ireland have never given us funding. We've never been recognised because, as Lorcan said, we don't have bed nights. And I really take it personal that, you know, somebody has that power to basically turn away an industry that we've worked so hard to grow and that is growing all over the world, and ports are crying out for these ships, and they're movable assets. They'll be gone in a heartbeat, because when we don't want them, Lisbon will take them, Amsterdam will take them. You know, and that's my concern.
We're not blind to the freight issue. Like,
no.
We've 18 stores on the island or whatever. If we don't have stock, there's no point bringing in a whole lot of cruise ships or people
to buy the stock.
You know, we absolutely you know, we understand the importance of freight. This isn't a freight versus thing. We're saying you can have both. And we're also saying is around the country, we probably need investment in other ports that have freight. So there's freight coming into Dublin that gets driven from Dublin down to Cork, or goes down to
Waterford. Animal feeds that goes to Waterford.
We're saying we can have both. Absolutely, freight, of course, is very important to the country, and it's very important to your Richard's 2,500 members and Brian's 2,000 members. So, like, nobody's being naive that we don't need to.
I think
we do need an all-Ireland look at this, because there's underutilised capacity in some ports, overutilised capacity in Dublin, and from an Ireland basis, can we not just look at the whole country?
Well, I think it's been a very productive.
Trying to get a happy medium, yeah.
So just to reiterate that, we'd write as a committee to Dublin Port, ask to engage urgently with you, and we'll write to we'll write to the Minister, and we'll also communicate through our administration here, our secretariat, if there's any, to make sure we make the arguments that you want us to articulate.
Okay.
Is that okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So our meeting is now adjourned until 1:30 p.m. on the 12th of June 2019. Thank you.
Good job.